Okay, folks, we've got $25 to the winner this evening. $25.
$25.
That's it?
$25. That's it.
Yeah, all right. Who's ordering this?
And you got Harvard's basket.
Let's see, who are we gonna?
I know who you're gonna have.
Who's gonna volunteer to pick the winner? Who's gonna volunteer?
I know where he's going.
We know where he's going, right there.
It's always the new guy.
Where's the new person? The new person. Pick a winner.
You gotta read it, he can't see.
554
Ooh.
838.
838. Now
Oh,
listen.
right here.
Wait.
Fix.
Do not discard your tickets.
Uh-oh.
We have more.
Ooh.
Okay? All right, I'm hanging on. We have a special gift coming to you. Do not throw your ticket down. All right, but Aaron, you did win $25.
Hey.
What's the second place prize?
Ah, that's a super prize.
Under $1,000.
$100,000. Congratulations. Coin?
You really are checking. You should have given the cord. Very nice. You should have given the cord.
All right, one item, two items actually. before
What's the other
we
prize?
we get going. What? Hold on to them. Hold on to them.
It's too much like work now.
Hold on to them. All right, it was noted last meeting, okay, that on every 2 years, as per our Constitution, we have elections, okay, or we can have elections. All right. So what I usually call it the even-numbered years. All right. I'm just going to read to you what is in our broadcaster. Okay. We were a month behind, so I apologize for that. I did announce it last month, but it wasn't in the broadcaster, so now it is. All right, so NJARC Executive Board elections will take place at the July meeting. Positions are listed on page 2 of the broadcaster, which is the print block of all the Executive Board members, the Vice President, President, and all that. Okay. If you desire to run for one of these offices, please be prepared to have someone place your name in nomination at the June meeting, which is now. If no nominations are received or proposed, voting shall be in July by a show of hands by all meeting attendees to re-elect the present board. All right. If nominations are received, a secret ballot will be used. So therefore, right now, June meeting, someone wants to propose someone, please raise your hand. Okay. What's that? Number 2, if you follow the reflector today, all right, again, what we are about as a club. Chuck, what was your problem?
What, today?
Yeah.
What's your problem?
What was your problem?
I was desperately trying to find a replacement resistor. For an old
Transistor.
I'm a transistor for an old bending amplifier.
Right.
And I had no idea where to get this information.
Number wasn't in the DCG.
And all kinds of people jumped in.
And all kinds of people jumped. Isn't it
I
amazing?
was like overwhelmed.
This is the
didn't have
club that we
date
are.
answers.
This is the people we are, that we help each other like that.
That was great.
And you didn't have anybody saying to you, hey Chuck, it's solid state, who gives a shit?
Everybody was really helpful.
They might have been thinking it.
You know, it was a thread I kept following. I didn't understand it, but it was amazing between Al and Fader. And it was wonderful. Everybody tried.
Let me make just
Go ahead.
a side comment there. The fact that we can support pictures and attachments
Yes.
on that reflector is
Yes.
real important, because that problem wasn't going to get solved without everybody involved seeing the schematic.
Right.
We put the schematic up 5 people read it, knew what was going on, came up with solutions.
Yeah. No, you were part of that too, yeah. No, but that's the club we are, and that's
I got a
amazing.
whole education today.
Everything you didn't want to know about power supplies and furnaces.
Okay. All right, Professor Mike is back, so we can start our presentations this evening.
All right.
Thank you for coming back.
I hope you weren't waiting for me.
We were, everybody's sitting around. Where's Professor Mike? I said he's got his last spare rib he's having.
Paella.
Oh, it's paella.
Pretty good.
The chef was from Valencia, Spain.
Okay, we got to start our presentations. Again, we are missing our treasurer, but that's okay. Our 2 presenters will expand. David, what is that when you do this? You do this? What do you do that?
Stretch.
In order, what do you do?
Yeah. No, I cut mine down from the original 6 hours to fit into tonight.
All right, Sal, our vice president, will start off with everything you wanted to know about capacitors and were afraid to ask.
Not everything, some things.
We were told everything.
Remember,
Okay.
hold on to your tickets.
All right, now hold on, right away I see a problem.
I don't need that.
You may.
What happened? No wireless? Oh, okay. All righty. How many times you grab a capacitor off your workbench, or your little bins or whatever, and you see a number on it that says, I'll put my glasses on, that says, of course I pick one I can't read. Where'd you buy that?
How about 473?
563K. Now you say, so what does 563K mean? Okay? Well, see, it's cheat sheets. Like behind my, that's why I brought my business cards out here. All right? I have it in the back of my business cards. So if you didn't have a business card, or your internet was down, and you need to know what is a 563K capacitor. So there's a method to this madness to figure out what it is. So,
Draw on the screen.
right on the screen. I am.
It's right on the screen.
Come on, dry erase marker. I brought one just in case. There's none here.
All right.
So this presentation's not going to be that long. I'll try to stretch it for Rich's sake. But
No.
anyway, we have a 563K. It's labeled 563K. So we put a 5, 6, 3,
K.
K. It's right. As I keep writing, it's going to get smaller and smaller. So that's a problem that I have. Okay.
There's a cure for that.
I wish there was. Okay. Anyway, let's split this up this way.
That's where,
Oh!
Sal looks better when you turn the lights off.
Okay, which side's better? This side or this side? No, anyway.
Never mind.
Okay, so the first 2 digits are the significant digits. So what you're going to do is this.
Right?
You're going to write a 5 down,
Yeah,
3 down,
yeah.
I'm sorry, 6.
Thank goodness.
Hey, this is real time, guys.
Right, stuff makes eraser here.
No wonder my rating wasn't working. So you put 5, 6. 3 is the multiplier.
Yeah.
K is the tolerance.
Okay.
So you add 3, so you write the first significant digit, the second digit, 3 zeros.
Okay.
So the capacitor is 56,000 picofarads. Well, you're not going to find 56,000. You're not going to go to the mouse and catalog and buy a 56,000 picofarad capacitor. What you do is you go back 6 digits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You put a 0. So what you have is a 0.056 microfarad capacitor. So that's how you figure out the value when you look at a capacitor. Is you put down the first 2 digits down on a piece of paper. Let's pick another example. What I can read. Okay, a 105J. Oh, by the way, K is 5% tolerance. I'm sorry, I forgot my alphabet. J is 5%. K is 10%.
Better check the
Okay.
cheat sheets. Rad.
No, this is all, I'm winging it. I'm winging it. Okay. So,
Hey, your name is spelled wrong on the business cards.
All right. Let's do
Who can write the name upside down? Okay, anyway. Anyway. Okay, I digress. Okay, this next capacitor I have is 105J.
There you go.
So you put a 1, 0, 5, J.
There you go.
So you put down the 1, the 0. How many zeros after that?
Five.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you have a 1 million picofarad capacitor.
6 times 5.
So you go back six times, six digits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
What's the decimal?
So you have a 1 microfarad capacitor. What, microfarad? Yes, 105J. 104J is at
Point one.
at 5%. Okay. So now, okay. Remember the good old bumblebees?
Yeah.
Same, they put colors just like a resistor. The same thing. 0 black, 1 brown, 2 red, 3 orange, 4 yellow, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Same thing. You put down the first 2 digits. Like this one here is a brown and a black. So you put a 1 and a 0. Orange, 3 zeros. You come back. It's a 0.01 microfarad capacitor. Same thing.
That should go in the trash.
The guitar guy. goes,
Sell it on eBay.
That should go into Les Paul.
Okay. I have handouts here for anyone who wants it to help them out. Now, also the mica capacitors.
Yes.
I printed out charts for everyone, handouts. If you want to figure out what the capacitors are, it could be 6 dots on it, 4 dots, 3 dots, 5 dots, and these handouts will 7 dots. No.
And an arrow.
Is that?
And an arrow.
And an arrow. And an arrow. Exactly, an arrow. So, if you need to figure out what the microcapacitors are, it's right out here.
Thanks. Wow.
Now, ceramic disc capacitors.
Okay.
You're going to see codes on them, like say 1H, 2A, 2T, 2D, and so on and so forth. With my handy dandy chart, you'll know the voltages of the capacitors. Okay, so if you have a, if you have like a 104 and then a 2J on top of that, it's a 630 volt microcapacitor. Also, well, there are picofarads, nanofarads. I guess the Europeans use nanofarads and microfarads. Don't worry about nanofarads. But my handy dandy chart will tell you what is what. Basically, a 0.1 microfarad capacitor is 100 nanofarads or 100,000 picofarads. So, more charts.
All right.
Okay. Now, on the old radios, the old capacitors, there was always a line on it that told you which side is ground. Okay. Now, that is there's no polarity. There's no like negative or positive like an electrolytic on a film capacitor. What that line told you was, this is the ground. This is the outer foil of the capacitor. Okay. So you would want to, like, if you're going to build a high gain amplifier or preamp, or I guess even the beginning stages of radios, you may want to know which end is which. I mean, most likely no, but if you're a stickler, you could figure out which side is the negative, the outer foil lead, with an oscilloscope. Now, you can only use this on the smaller capacitors. The larger capacitors, it's going to be hard to tell. So basically, you turn this on.
While you're setting it up, what do you mean by large or smaller?
Well, like a 0.047, it's going to be really hard. 0.001, you can tell.
Right.
0.047, 1 microfarad, 0.1. It's going to be really tough to tell. But at least the lower values, you can tell which side is the outer foil.
So if you can't tell, does it not matter, or does it still matter?
Don't know.
What you're saying in amplifiers, it's
Well, especially in preamplifiers, for less hum, if you have a power transformer nearby.
so
something like that.
that's what you're saying, you're trying to take the hum out.
Right. So you want the outer foil to be connected to the ground, the low potential, lowest potential in an amplifier.
And the inside foil is connected to the grids. And the short lead on the grid, long lead down to the chassis.
Yeah.
Short leads.
Right.
You have less than 6 months.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So anyway, I have a 472J capacitor, which is a .0047. At how many percent? 5%. Ding, 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 ding. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to set up your scope to the lowest voltage possible. And what happened is you're going to be measuring the 60 cycle, you know, that's in the airway. So like for instance, when you touch this, you get your 60 cycles on the oscilloscope. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut your ground lead on one leg, the other lead on the other side. What you do is, now some of these capacitors, like I said, it's hard to tell. You hold your fingers again on the capacitor without touching the leads. And then you take note of the waveform. Now we reverse it. No. Oh, wait.
Watch your fingers.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to talk. I think I'm going to. Oh, here we go. Let me go a little bit higher so we can see this. This is all real time. If this doesn't work, I'm sorry. I tried that at home.
I have a little test tube.
Without a net.
Okay.
Okay, that's about two. Let's reverse the leads. I'm not holding the leads.
It's just
I'll let you do a .001. You'll see what I mean with that.
I think the larger diameter is tight, gives you a bigger difference.
Like I said, it doesn't work well with the larger capacitors, the smaller ones. You can tell the difference. The smaller value capacitors, lower value.
Try with the bubble.
Yeah, sure.
triple throw switch.
Okay. When I take a look at that,
Reverse.
let's reverse it. Do I have the? Oh, come on, it's worked at home.
The theory works, you're right.
What are we supposed to see?
Well, okay, one way, you see a larger waveform, and when you reverse it, the lower waveform. The ground lead, that's when you see the lower waveform, is the outer foil of the capacitor.
So you'll see two of them.
Lower waveform is the ground.
Is the ground, yes, which is the outer foil.
You know it does work, I've used a digital voltmeter, which actually, in other words, you can actually see the reading in millivolts.
All right.
So you can actually, if it's a, very small difference.
I did it at home at work too, so it does.
Yeah, it works.
You did? See, testimonial right here.
No, I actually have a little jig to show.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay, no, I was kidding.
Just a triple throw, triple pole switch.
Or you can look through an audio.
Okay, what happened here?
Listen to it.
Yeah, you can do that too, I guess.
Okay, my scope just died.
Oh, you get the same scope I do.
What if the poles operate the LEDs?
You can stay there till it works.
One by one.
Use a different channel.
No, it's on channel 8.
Tough crowd tonight.
I know, Jesus.
But it's got me showing all the way
Let's go to channel 2.
Maybe the scope
Here we
needs
go.
new capacitor?
Yeah, I didn't recap the oscilloscope.
I know where you can get a few of those.
All right, here we go. Let's try this side.
Oh, it's gonna work this time.
I have so many scopes, I just grabbed this one in my pile of scopes. I tried that last night, it worked.
We've heard that excuse.
It's gonna make a liar out of me.
There you go.
Okay, there's that.
Yes.
Let's
The
reverse
problem
this.
is you're trying to hold it and do it at the same time.
Right, it needs to
You have
go
to
a
have
switch,
a jig
yeah, a double pole double throw switch or
You're
something.
not holding on to it.
Oh, anyway, it works. Trust me, it works.
It does work.
See that? We have two testimonials.
And it's simple to build a little jig with a triple throw, triple pole switch.
Triple pole, why do you need triple pole?
You reverse it.
No, but it'd be double pole double throw.
No, the reason for triple is because you put a 1.5 volt or 3 volt battery and have a little LED.
Oh, okay, okay.
A red and a green, and it just tells you which side's the red.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
So forget about the scope, use this method, it's better.
I never
Use
used
a digital voltmeter.
How do you do the digital voltmeter?
Same thing, you connect a digital voltmeter,
Right.
and then you touch it, and it'll read like,
Oh, okay,
two millivolts.
right,
They turn the other way, you'd be like 1.5 millivolts.
okay.
So-
That's probably like, yeah.
And what's the significance then?
Yeah, so which
The lower the
one?
voltage,
It's up to that, yeah.
the lower the voltage, that's the
Right,
downside.
right. The higher the voltage is the, with the probe.
But if you need little cheat sheets, I got a bunch of cards up here with all the numbers in the back,
Right.
what they are. So help yourselves. And I guess the second part, I might as well do it now.
Wait, Sal, question.
Yes.
Years ago, when they actually put the ring to tell you the foil size on the capacitor, they had a reason for that, right? They said, well, we better tell them which is the foil size.
Oh, this is
For-
standard engineering.
For a
practice.
reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. That bag doesn't have rings on it. And if you're a manufacturer, you're not going to find the rings on it either. Does it really make a difference? In other words, when the guy that's making an amplifier, a commercial amplifier, does he actually specify, well, only sell me capacitors where I know the foil side is marked?
Well, he's not gonna use those capacitors, he's probably gonna use Cornell dual
That's
capacitors. That are-
They're already
I don't think they mark them any.
I saw the
brand ones they
YouTube
do.
video on this,
Yeah, there's one guy from Canada, right?
right? He's a professor, and when he demonstrates it, you can see its significance. It might be 50% more
Right.
on one than the other. Not like what you were getting
I mean, you know, it's
here.
funny, we did it at one of the clinics, I did it last night, and then you've seen a difference, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a big difference.
The last clinic that we
Yeah.
had, you brought that.
But
in.
of course,
You could see.
when you're putting it into the circuit, if you're into the front end of the radio, what's getting through there is being amplified.
Right.
And you want to try to get them in right.
Right.
What Paul's alluding to is Mr. Carlson's laboratory.
Right,
He's
that's
an
it.
amazing guy on YouTube. He's a Canadian, and he's a young guy, and he does these great presentations and restorations too.
And it
And
was
what
very
you're talking about,
Sal, There's not a
why
lot
is
of
your,
shit in the air here, it's just
capacitor
kind of a
back?
shielded environment too, so there
See
might
that
not
guy
be.
kept shocking himself at the Christmas party video?
Was that?
No.
Oh, could you do some of that for us?
No. Inside this bag is
He built a thing like mine.
25 values.
What's that, Sal?
About 15 components.
Well,
Inside this bag, there's 125 capacitors, 5 of each value that I stopped. This is going to be the door prize. So I hope you listen so you can figure out, because usually I bag them separately, but I threw all 125 in one bag. Okay? So hopefully you listen real closely so you can figure out the value of the capacity you have, and from 0.001 to 1 microfarad.
You dropped the box open.
Nah.
You just dropped that box, right? You didn't feel like sorting them back out?
You know what? That's you funny you said that. I packed like 100-something capacitors, the radials, and I dropped the pots, and I Jesus
And you just
Christ.
put them in that bag.
And I put them in a bag. I went and I have capacitors all over my floors here and there because they drop. I leave them there. I grab another one. I don't bother looking for them. So one day I just cleaned them all up, and I things like 200 capacitors. I went on the antique radio forum. I said $5, grab that.
Grab that.
Cool. And the guy said, oh, and he was like, hey, you can put a 47 microfarad, 450 volt axial capacitor. I found it on my floor. It wasn't in the bag. But anyway, this is going to be the.
So you have your ticket, yes? So you're gonna have one more drawing for the bag, and you figure them out. Because Sal just instructed you how to do it, and you've got a cheat sheet too. Here we go. Jan, you're
You
it.
can measure with those new things.
That's right. Yeah. But that's the one they never write on anyway. Capacitors never write on. Those don't write.
All right,
Couple percent.
winning ticket is 554 816 816. Jerry.
Hey, Jerry.
1995 is the last time I won something.
Yeah, you even get this one, hermetically sealed. This was, what's that, cryogenic?
Yes, cryogenic.
Cryogenic.
Cryogenically treated capacitors.
There we go.
There we go.
Oh, hey, Jerry.
So serious.
Got it, got it.
Thank you.
Now, you were listening closely, right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I didn't get a card. I want-
Yeah, I threw one in there.
You don't need to, you're
Hey,
listening.
you need these? Take these.
I got it.
Okay.
All right,
Help
folks,
yourself, help
we'll have
yourself.
these out on the table later on. Let's, moving right along.
Just point this to the screen, but not the main.
All right, now that we had a fun session,
No, 'cause
we're going to have a serious session with our webmaster, Dave Sika, because he has something very serious to tell us about that's rather exciting, as a matter of fact.
He's leaving the club?
Always.
We ain't going that easy. See, I have a lot, so I didn't have time to do a PowerPoint presentation.
I didn't do much of a PowerPoint.
Ta-da.
Ta-da.
All right. So, and I came in costume tonight. So, I'm here to give you the barest overview. I have 3 days worth of work, which was preceded by like 6 years worth of work, condensed into a little presentation, all culminating in a 4-minute video at the end of this thing. And by the time you're done here, you will know way too much about CRT rebuilding.
Okay.
So, to start off at the end of an era, in 2010, the last picture tube rebuilder in the United States, which was Hawkeye Picture Tube in Iowa, closed their doors. After that, people were actually shipping CRTs across the Atlantic over to Paris. Rax was rebuilding picture tubes over there, and they managed to maintain that business until 2013, when they decided that there was not enough demand anymore for them for it to remain viable. So, what is a CRT? I'm sure you all know what a CRT is, but just in case, there's one here. This is actually not typical because this is a scope tube. We're talking more about TV tubes, but this is a CRT. And we will drop it on the floor. It's a vacuum tube like every other vacuum tube, the difference being that it's got a screen at one end, and instead of shooting the electrodes off of the cathode through a grid onto a plate to amplify a signal or do something else with it, you shoot the electrons off the cathode through some control electrodes, and they smack into the screen and they make it glow. And by controlling that electron beam, scanning it and modulating it, you make a picture. Okay, so you got the target, you modulate the intensity of it, and you scan it back and forth and up and down. That's a CRT. There are 2 types of CRTs that are used in televisions primarily. You can have CRTs that have the beam scanned, deflected electrostatically or deflected electromagnetically. That's not real important except for one thing, which we'll see later, and that is that one of the types of tubes is easy to rebuild and one is very difficult to rebuild. But you either use plates that are internal to the tube that will, the charges on the plates will attract and repel the electron beam, or you use coils wrapped around the tube and they move the beam that way. That's enough of that. We don't need to know about that in order to be able to rebuild them. Okay, what goes wrong with CRTs? Your filament could burn out, your cathode could lose its emission, could lose the ability to emit electrons after it gets all worn out. The phosphor on the screen could wear out also. That's not a terribly common problem, but it can happen under certain circumstances. And you can be a dumbass like me and you can break them occasionally. That's a deal breaker. We can't fix those. When you want to rebuild a picture tube, what do you do with it? Okay, well basically you're going to replace the gun. This is the historically what was done. The companies would manufacture new gun assemblies. The rebuilders would buy the gun assemblies, and that whole structure, which has the filament inside the cathode and all the control electrodes that serve to modulate and shape the beam, and you would take that whole gun assembly and you would just basically pop a new one inside the tube. If the screen phosphor was damaged or worn out, that could be, by some rebuilding facilities, could be replaced into black and white tubes. Traditionally, it was done by large companies, it was done by small companies. This process is not rocket science. There were all kinds of little mom and pop shops that used to rebuild CRTs. You could buy CRT lathes and CRT rebuilding jigs. You could buy these things, you could set them up in a shed behind your TV shop. People used to do this, and it used to work. So it's not rocket science. Many of you have seen, there's a video on YouTube that's really cool. There's a guy named Claude Payard over in France. He builds vacuum tubes from scratch, basically with a penknife and a pair of pliers, and they work. And there's a guy in our club, James O'Neill, who builds vacuum tubes in his basement. And I haven't been to see his basement yet. He lives in Virginia, but I'm going there someday because I got to see that. And he does not use a pocket knife, and he makes very nice tubes apparently. So what's the steps in building a CRT? So the first step is you clean all the crud off the outside, including the old aquadag, which is the conductive coating that's used on the outside of the shell of most picture tubes to form the exterior surface of a capacitor to use in the high voltage filtering. By the time you need to rebuild that, it's just junk that's got to come off there so that it doesn't gum up the rest of the process. The second step is you remove the old gun. You literally cut the end off the tube and you take the innards out. And if you're going to have an aluminized tube, you would need to rephosphor and re-aluminize the tube at that point. An aluminized tube would have a very thin coating of vaporized aluminum that would be deposited on the back of the phosphor on the screen. It gives you a couple of advantages. The two advantages are that it makes the picture look brighter. An aluminized tube is a better performer than a non-aluminized tube, and you can use a straight gun as opposed to a bent gun when you're running the tube, because the aluminum layer stops ions. Ions will damage the screen. Electrons make the screen light up. Ions damage the screen. So a bent gun is designed so that it shoots the electrons and the ions off at the wrong angle, and then the circuitry is there's an ion trap in there, which an ion trap pulls the ions off and makes them hit the side of the tube, lets the electrons go out straight to hit the front of the tube where they're supposed to go. This will be important later. You'll see later on, because there's a worldwide shortage of bent guns out there. But we'll get to that later. So the next step is, I'm sorry, what was that?
What next?
What's next after a shortage of bent guns?
Well, there's many problems. We'll get to that. You don't want to go there. Next step is you would weld the new, you seal the button and gun assembly onto the neck glass. We're going to show you all this too. It all sounds very cryptic, but there's pictures. The button is the part with the pins, with the connections on the bottom, and then you have to put a new piece of glass on the tube to replace the part that you cut off so that the thing stays to be the correct length. You then take that whole assembly. You would weld that back onto the tube to where you had cut the old piece off. Then you have to put it in an oven and hook it up to a vacuum pump, and you have to suck all the air out of it, and you have to bake it at a high temperature while you're doing that to make sure that you get all the molecules out of there that would interfere with these electrons flying through the tube. After that, you have to do a getter flash. Getter, it's the same as in a conventional vacuum tube. You got to put a chemical in there which will scavenge any remaining molecular contamination in the tube, anything that you missed in the pumping down, or anything that happens to outgas from the materials inside the tube over the life of the tube. You remove any debris that might be in there by zapping it and basically vaporizing it with high voltage, anything that might tend to short out between the electrodes. You then activate the new cathode. You feed it, basically you over voltage it for a while to perform some sort of chemical magic that I don't really know a whole lot about. But anyway, you boil that thing for a while and you get it to activate. Then you hook it up to a CRT tester, and if you get good readings on it, you install a base on it, you pop it back in the TV, and it works. That's a lot, but it really is. It's not rocket science. There's not a whole lot behind it. But there is an astounding number of ways that I found out over the course of the 3 days to screw this thing up. Even though old guys were doing it in the back of their shop, in a dirty, filthy room with a penknife and a Phillips screwdriver. we found innumerable ways to mess this up, every single way along the entire process. Rebuilding black and white tubes versus color tubes. People ask us about that. The guns in the tubes are actually very similar. There's 3 guns in a color tube. There's 1 gun in a black and white tube, but it's virtually identical. There's some minor differences, but the construction of them is fairly similar. Everything is fairly similar about how it works. There's really no differences on that level between a color tube and a black and white tube. The screens are dramatically different. And again, we'll get to that a little bit. The issues that you would run into in repairing picture tubes, there are 2 things that are either difficult or impossible to deal with. And pre-war picture tubes are made of a different type of glass than post-war picture tubes. And they don't make the repair parts out of the Pyrex, the hard glass, the Pyrex glass. And I think I have some more of that coming up on another screen. So repairing pre-war picture tubes is a little bit dicier, and that's always been dicey, and it's going to continue to be dicey. We're working on that. There's a lot of pre-war picture tubes out there that need to be worked on. Hopefully that'll work, but that's another level of complexity that you don't get on a regular black and white picture tube. And color tubes that have screen burn on them are not repairable. You can't fix the screen of a color tube. You can do some repairs on a black and white screen. And the reason that you can't repair on a black and white tube, the way you would repair the screen, you basically just wash off the coating on the front of the tube, and you can basically put a solution of phosphor in there. You let it settle down, and it adheres to the tube. You lay the tube with the face down. The phosphor settles. It adheres. You decant the remaining liquid off there. You treat it a little bit. You basically have a new screen on that tube. It's that simple. A color tube is made by having a shadow mask. Thank you. A shadow mask, and 3 individual beams have to line up and shoot through that shadow mask, and they have to be lined up so that the green beam only hits the green phosphor, the red beam only hits the red phosphor, the blue beam only hits the blue phosphor. RCA, when they invented this picture tube, spent surely millions and millions of dollars to come up with a machine that would print phosphors on such tiny, precise dots like that. The shadow mask has 250,000 tiny holes drilled in it, and each slight imperfection in those holes that might be there has to be matched up with a corresponding imperfection in the dots, or the whole thing doesn't work. So at least when they started out this process, they basically had to put that shadow mask in the tube, shoot light through it onto a photosensitized layer, and make each face of each tube to match the shadow mask. It was a very, very complex process, and those machines don't exist anymore. We don't have access to those, and it would cost $1 million. Nobody's going to be re-phosphoring color picture tubes. That's bad news for the gaming guys, because the video games have managed to burn the phosphors of the color tubes, and there isn't, and there probably won't ever be a way to fix those. So that's bad news for them. And
Just slap an LED in it.
Could be. It's really unusual that you would burn the screen of a black and white tube. We do have the equipment to rephosphor the screens, so it's not going to be something that would be a huge demand for, but it's something that we'll probably be able to do.
What if they're ion spotted? Does the ion spot, can you get rid of the ion spot, or is that?
If you have a problem on the screen, if you have a problem with the phosphor, you have to wash it off, and then you would settle a new layer on there. And again, we have phosphors, and we have the equipment, which again is not terribly sophisticated. We have the aluminizing equipment, so yeah, it could be done.
I thought a color TV tube usually had 1 gun, except for the Trinitrons. Is that not so?
A color TV tube always has
Just 1 gun,
always
rather
has,
than 3 guns.
Yeah, no, I think that there were a couple of unusual systems that had a single gun, but all conventional and certainly all early colored picture tubes had 3 guns.
Well, wasn't that the selling point for the Sony Trinitron, the 3 guns?
Well, and one gun.
Some-
One gun, one gun.
some-
One gun.
There were 3 or 4 vaguely different systems. The Trinitron was probably the most popular, but if we're talking about the early, the second generation picture tubes, your 21AX, P22s, all the early color round tubes, which is the ones that people are most interested in at this point. It was all conventional construction, absolutely identical to the black and white tubes, except there was 3 of them and what's on the screen. Okay, so I started to talk about the pre-war tubes before. Obviously, there's a huge interest in being able to rebuild the pre-war tubes because these are the first generation sets, highly collectible, highly valuable. People want to get these things working, want to put money into them. But the picture tubes are made out of Pyrex, and all of the replacement parts are made out of regular soft glass. So there is a trick that they used to use when they were still rebuilding picture tubes commercially, and you can source from the glass manufacturers glass with different coefficients of expansion, and you would have to get little cylinders of glass, all the same size as the neck of the picture tube, with stepped coefficients of expansion. You have to put 3 or 4 of those in there and hope that they don't break when you heat them and when they cool down again. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So that's going to be an ongoing area of research. That's going to be tricky.
The original rebuilders of black and white tubes, how long did the rebuild last?
If they did it right, the rebuild would be as good as the original tube.
And what would that be? I really don't know.
Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, we got plenty of picture tubes out there now that are still good, 50, 60 years later.
Well, how many hours, I'm saying?
I don't know that anybody's ever calculated the number of hours, and I don't know that in a consumer environment that anybody ever, I don't know if RCA calculated that, if they did light tests. That's a good question. I don't really know. I do know that certain rebuilders had reputations where the TV repair guys would say, well, don't buy the tubes from that guy because they're not going to last so long. And you get them from so-and-so instead. Okay. Rebuilding electrostatic tubes. This is another area where we're still learning. There's a lot of, all of the smaller TVs, all your little tabletop TVs use the small diameter picture tubes. They'll use the 7JP4s, 3KP4s. We're not 100% sure, but we don't know that anybody's ever rebuilt electrostatic picture tubes. Well, we're not sure. I have not personally met anybody who's done it.
I've never seen it.
And I haven't talked to anybody who says they've met anybody who's done it. And somebody postulated the other day that the reason is when you have an electrostatic tube, you have your deflection plates in here, everything comes out to the base. And depending on how the tube is manufactured, you gotta cut this tube. You'll see them cut the tubes. You gotta cut the tube. You gotta yank everything out, and then you gotta shove all new stuff back in there. And it seems that it would be at least difficult to get the deflection plates out of there and back in again. Plus, you can't buy any new guns anymore with deflection plates. We'll talk about rebuilding the guns, which we're working on. But anyway, we don't know. It seems like it would be a simple question, but nobody knows that it's ever been done. So since we've never run across it, we're assuming that all the stories that they never rebuilt electrostatic picture tubes are true. There's nothing stopping us. You can shove a new filament and a new cathode in there. But the deflection plate issue is an unknown quantity right now. So obviously we're going to be disassembling a few electrostatic picture tubes and see what happens. But that's to come in the future. Okay. Now versus then. I mean, as in working on any old radio, we have to do things and we have to fix things. We have to work with techniques that the old guys never did. Back when they were doing this stuff commercially. The equipment we have. A whole bunch of the original equipment. Hawkeye Picture Tube donated all of their equipment when they closed. Rack's equipment we purchased for scrap value and had it shipped over here from Paris. We're not using all of it, but we're using most of it. And we are custom making a couple of pieces of equipment where some of the original equipment either was not appropriate to use, or some of it was full of, what'd you find in the ovens, Darren?
What's that? Oh,
What- Yeah.
well.
Yeah, Darren came out of the oven and he said, "I think I'm covered with asbestos."
Yeah,
So we-
well, the ride back in that trailer didn't help it very much.
So we decided to build new ovens with modern ceramic insulation instead of using the asbestos. Anyway, and obviously this is not a commercial venture, so in order to get it off the ground, we had to go into a fundraising mode and come up with some money to kick this thing off. The old guys never had to work about that. Mark.
I don't know if this is an obvious question, but, all right, so you're gonna wind up with a new gun, you're gonna wind up with a rephosphored piece of glass. So the only thing you're really, I mean, in the old days, when they rebuilt these things, and the only thing you're really salvaging is the glass tube. Why? Why not just buy a new tube?
If you
What
were
was the advantage of rebuilding?
If you rebuild the tube, you could rebuild the tube for a fraction of the price of a new tube. And point this one up there and that one over there.
All right.
I don't know, a new tube was,
Well, I mean, think about it. Of course, the gun you gotta buy.
the screen was probably good, the envelope was good. You had to buy the gun. The guns were really cheap. Back in the
So
olden days.
you're getting a piece of glass.
No, you buy the gun and the button.
All right, so you wind up with the
The
only
point is,
thing
the only thing original is the glass. So
Okay.
What
why-
is the envelope and the screen, which had a great amount of value to it.
Dave, can I
Sure.
make a guess at something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, for your moment. I would suspect that in the 50s, the most expensive component of the picture tube was the envelope. The glass.
Yeah, I think
And the most cumbersome to make and ship because of the size and weight.
well, and if you think about it too, we're talking about 10-inch tubes, 21-inch tubes on the absolute high side for color TVs. They were literally pushing the envelope. They were, the 10-inch tubes were hard enough to make. The larger ones were impossibly difficult to make.
Well, I'm saying the shipping, if they were rebuilt locally, which they were all over the country, which was about then you're taking shipping out of the equation. All you got to ship are the guns. I mean, it's a substantial cost savings.
I think it was about half the price,
Yeah,
roughly.
yeah, well,
So,
that's-
I mean, if you had a choice of getting just as good a picture tube for $50 or for $25, you'd probably go for the $25, especially if that was the better part of a week's wages,
Not to mention if the repair shop was doing it themselves. If the repair shop was doing it, well, that's pure profit to them.
Well, once they had invested in the equipment.
Yeah, well, they-
And some people managed to use it, again, any idiot could use it, but a lot of people found out that it was a little bit harder than they thought.
Did they always do everything when you rebuilt them? Like, did they always put new phosphor on it, or they just
No,
do
no.
So they,
As I said.
right, they just did what they needed to get it to work again.
It would be very unusual that the screen would be worn out of a
Right.
black and white tube. That would be very, very rare. The only ways a black and white screen could go bad is if it has a heavy ion burn on it, which only the older set, they fixed that right after World War II. You wouldn't see ion burns on screens after 1946. They had the ion traps in them by then. So you didn't end up with ion burns on the screen. If you necked the tube, if you knocked the evacuation tip or the neck, the air would rush in so fast that it would scour
Right.
the phosphor of the screen, and then the mom and pop shops didn't have the ability to rephosphor screens. But there were so many picture tubes that again they basically just popped in and redone and called it done.
How would you notice or identify a rebuilt tube?
A rebuilt tube always has a ridge, always has a weld on the neck. You'll see it in the little video at the end, but there's always a kind of a rough bump there. And in fact, that's how we even found out that there was speculation whether RCA ever rebuilt any of the 15 GP22s, the first color tubes. And I have one that has a weld in the neck. So, and the speculation there was that they were coming out of the factory bad, going right back in, and fixing them, and then coming out, and they were still considered new. Sorry.
How do they ensure that when you get you say you take the old gun out, cut it out, and now you put in the new gun, how do you ensure that it's aligned properly before you re-weld the glass or?
That's a great question, and the answer is, it really doesn't matter all that much.
You mean it could be cocked in there and it wouldn't make any?
Well, it's here's the gun. You can see, we can pass that back. We'll pass it around. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room in there. I mean, a gun that'll fit in a tube is going to go in, and it's going to be at worst in pretty close position. And the circuitry in the sets you could adjust that beam. Your centering and your horizontal and vertical adjustments on that were so wide you could be off by a mile.
So you only had to be close.
You only had to be close. It was like horseshoes and hand grenades.
There was one outfit that I recall back in the 50s who was selling rebuilt tubes. And they were promoting the fact that the tube was rebuilt and you were getting a better tube because the glass in the tube was, to quote them in their advertising, seasoned.
Cryogenically, perhaps.
Yeah.
Very well.
So if you nip the end off the tube, that spot on the front is the phosphor that inflates off?
The air has gone in like a sandblaster almost, and it's just gone in with such force that it's dislodged the phosphor off the
Now,
screen.
how safe it is to handle tubes? My dad years ago said that when he repaired stuff, you go into a bar and you repair the TV set there, and there was a TV set sitting on top of an old Bell wooden telephone booth, and someone like shot at it or threw bottles at it, and it blew the booth apart. Could that be possible? Could the implosion do that?
You got atmospheric pressure on the tube. If it shatters completely, it's going to implode at 14 pounds per square inch. So it's going to make a pretty big noise. But all the glass is going to hit in the middle, and then it's going to come out. You could get injured, but it's not like a bomb.
And I've never seen a tube that blew to pieces.
Nobody I know has ever seen a tube blow up.
I'll spread them on.
I think that was just a story that the telephone.
No, I'm sure it did, and I'm sure you could, I mean, you're supposed to wear safety goggles and a leather apron and whatnot. You could mess yourself up pretty bad. But I have broken a couple of tubes. Everybody I know has broken a couple of tubes. They usually break very uneventfully.
And does it matter where you break it in terms of the danger?
Sure, if you break the evacuation tip off the back, that's the safe way, actually. If you're going to put one in the trash, you should knock that off.
Yeah, just take a nipper.
That is not dangerous. That's not gonna. A lot of people, when the back of the set goes missing, and then they're moving it, and they knock it against the door frame. That's necking a tube. You knock the whole back of the tube off, and the air goes in and shoots. But again, it's not going to explode.
Okay.
If you hit the screen with a brick, or you hit the side of the tube, with a brick, yeah, you could end up in a bad situation. If it falls off the table, maybe.
I had one RCA that I had stored in one of the school buses at the yard, and I went in one day, and here, the picture tube had blown in it. And what was interesting was when the picture tube blew, it pulled the whole safety glass on the front of the set in and destroyed the safety glass. There was enough force to literally just blow the safety glass in. I've never seen another one do it, and I don't know what blew it on that one, except perhaps the extreme temperature change.
You'll see an interesting shot here when we intentionally break the tube, and you'll see that literally nothing happens.
Yeah.
The most exciting implosion of a picture tube that I've ever seen was on a 32-inch Sony Trinitron, one of the later heavy.
A lot of atmosphere is there.
Yeah, well, what happened is at the school, it was on top of one of those tall carts, and the students saw fit to push the cart down the stairs. And the set had been in recent use. So what made it more dramatic than usual? The glass, I would say, we were finding thrown glass from the implosion. probably within like 8 to 9 feet of where the set was. That's how far through the glass was. The most exciting part is, because I caught it out of the corner of my eye before I could stop it, the capacitors were charged in the set, I guess, and when the set hit, there was a flash, as well as flying glass.
Well, if you look on YouTube, there are people who find great amounts of amusement in breaking picture tubes, and they've all got it documented for posterity. But I think it's highly overrated. But I still would wear safety glasses and
The students who pushed the set down the steps did not wear safety glasses.
Okay, and then the other thing is, and I talked about all the ways to screw this up. The other thing is that it's science, but there is a staggering amount of art involved in here. You got to get a feel for the temperature. You got to get a feel. It's almost like you have to have a mind meld. You have to become one with the tube or with the process. I'm not kidding. I mean, this is not an automated process, and the people who do this just did it, but they had a skill they may not have even appreciated, because the guys who just did it all day long, every day, they knew what they were doing. Now, us guys come in, we don't do it all day long, we don't do it every day, and boy, did we find out that there's a million ways to make mistakes. So, one of the guys from the Early Television Foundation went over to RACS, went over to France for 2 weeks. It was a rough assignment. But and he apprenticed over there, and he rebuilt tubes under the tutorship of the guys over there who've been doing it for years. And one of the 10-inch tubes, one of the 10 BP4s that he did when he was over there, has been running for the last several years in a set in the Early Television Museum. So he's the only guy right now of the Early Television group that has anything close to a real good idea of how to do this. And the other guys are all retired. Okay. Other thing that we have to worry about is availability of parts. We bought up and continue to buy up any new old stock gun assemblies that show up. We thought we were in real good shape, and then we found out that we have a pretty good inventory. We have a pretty good inventory of gun assemblies, including a whole bunch of ones that we could use, and a whole bunch of ones that are for like weird CRTs that we're never going to be able to do anything with. All of the 1940s and 1950s picture tubes that are the ones that the collectors are interested in doing. We don't have a whole lot of those. So we may turn, some more may turn up in collectors, old shops, eBay, whatever. When they do, we get them. But there's a limited supply of replacement gun assemblies out there, and that's a big issue. So what's the answer then? Well, you go into every picture tube that needs to be rebuilt has a gun in it. The cathode wore out, but the structure of the gun is fine. So the issue is you take the gun out and you rebuild it. You get a new cathode assembly, you put it inside the old gun. Easier said than done. We've got one guy, there's some interesting characters involved in this project. They're all smart guys, not like me. There are some really smart guys working on this project. One guy has access to an electron erosion, Mike, help me out here. They shoot electron beams at parts and basically cut them apart by hitting them with a beam of electrons. Electron erosion.
Electric discharge.
Yeah, whatever. It's a very high-tech, very expensive, very precise process for taking things apart.
EDM?
EDM. No, is that
EDM is an electrode that uses.
It almost doesn't matter. It's a really high-tech thing, and the success rate has been 50%, which is not good. So we're still working on that. Gun rebuilding, we're going to have to rebuild guns. It's become clear that we're absolutely going to have to rebuild the existing guns in these tubes, because we're going to run out of replacement guns. We already have run out of certain replacement guns. So it is absolutely mandatory that the old guns are going to have to be rebuilt. And there are a couple of really smart people working on that problem right now, and it obviously will be solved somehow, someday. We don't know how.
Where was Hawkeye getting the guns from?
Well, the guns were manufactured by a couple of places in the United States, but they're not being manufactured anymore. However, we go down to the next bullet point. Well, maybe we can get some new guns made. And there is an outfit in India that makes this type of stuff, and they have been approached, and they are open to making 1940s vintage black and white guns and round 21-inch color tube 3-gun assemblies. We have no idea what their minimum order would be yet. We have no idea what these things would end up costing. They do this type of work all the time, so it could be done. Whether it's going to be practical or not, we don't know. There's somebody working on it right now.
What do they do it for now if they don't make CRTs or fix them anymore?
If I answer that question, I'll have to kill you. There's one company left in the United States that does apparently or supposedly super secret military work. And it's probably $50,000
Radar screens.
Yeah, I don't know. But the people who make vacuum tubes, who make the innards of the vacuum tubes from scratch, this is a no-brainer for them. But to tool up and do it and make, if we need to buy 50,000 parts, that may not be practical. So we don't know. Again, that's to be determined.
Okay. Other than the pin wiring, are all 7-inch guns the same? What would the difference be? If you're just shooting electrons, are there variations within the size of a gun? or-
That's another real good question that I wish I could answer, and I never thought to ask that question.
Especially in black and white.
Yeah, the guns are all fairly similar. For example, all the tubes all the 10-inch tubes all had virtually identical guns in them. I suspect, although I haven't seen this, probably the 12-inch tubes and the 10-inch tubes, all the guns are fairly similar. Now again, you get to the 7-inch tubes, that's a totally different type of tube, so they're going to be designed a little bit differently in there.
Within the size?
I think they're more similar than they would be different, and I think we're probably
Could you make a generic?
going to be able to make, obviously if we have to have 50,000 of something made, we're going to get one order of 50,000 and make it for, the most common denominator. But again, don't know if there could be something that would be generic enough that would work. That's something we're going to find out over the ensuing months. Phosphors. We did get a supply of phosphor from the rebuilding facility in France. There is a guy right here in New Jersey. He's not a member of the club, but he's a chemist, and he's actually been working on mixing phosphors, trying to figure out how to recreate some of these old formulas. And again, it's not rocket science. The formulas are known. That part of the problem should be fairly easy to deal with. And again, we're only looking at one type. We're looking at the white phosphor. So there's enough to get us through quite a few tubes into the future, and we can probably replenish stocks or get something after that. Whether we could get somebody to make us Pyrex buttons, probably not going to happen. Whether we can find the right type of graduated coefficient of expansion glass, that's out there, but it's getting harder to find too. It's all custom order stuff now.
What are buttons?
I'm sorry, the button, if you, where's the gun? If you look on it, on a replacement tube will come in, we'll have a little glass disc at the bottom with the little gun assembly on it and the pins inside. That's the button. That has to get welded to a new piece of glass here. And so the buttons are all made out of soft glass, and the incompatibility between the two types of glass is another huge sticking point. So that, again, that's something that the old guys never had to worry about that we're wrestling with now. Of course, nothing's ever easy. One of the picture tubes that people are most interested in is the 15GP22. That's the first color picture tube. It was in use for only a part of 1 year. It was used from 1953, from beginning of the year up until August of that year or something, and then it was never current again. So there were very few of them made. It was the first tricolor picture tube that was ever made, so they were still learning on the job. And that tube is immensely popular because it's the one that all of the first generation color sets work on. And it was just fraught with problems. I mean, there were right now there are only a handful of 15GP22s still working. There's a much larger handful of tubes that have all gone to air because they leak. The problems with the 15 GP22 was primarily leaking. They didn't wear out. They didn't have time to wear out. Nobody ever used them long enough to wear them out. But they had several ways that they could leak air, and then hence they'd become bad. People have experimented with tape welding to weld a new seam to try to seal up any leaks in the welding on the. And I'll show you a picture of this. They've experimented with using frit glass, which is powdered low melting point glass that they melt onto the old glass where the leak might be coming through. There's special space age epoxies that people have experimented with putting on here trying to stop the leaks. There's been some successes, but I think those were just sort of exceptions to the rule. So far, the success has eluded people. Consistent success has eluded people. So there's a guy who said, okay, well, the problem with this tube is that there's glass to metal seal in here, which is causing all of these leak problems. So he's a university professor someplace, and you know those university professor guys that are all a little strange. So he just decided that he was just going to attack this problem from a completely different angle, and he was going to cut out all the metal stuff in there that was causing the problem, and he was going to make it all glass 15G out of the old tube. And I'll show you some pictures of what he did. I have to salute the guy. I mean, it's unbelievable the research that he's done. He hasn't succeeded yet, but he's not going to give up. And then the other possibility of dealing with the 15 GP22 problem is low temperature evacuation. There's another problem with the tube, which I'll show you in the next slide. But the tubes are baked out at very high temperature, about 800 degrees, 700 degrees, and they're evacuated at very high temperature. And we realized that part of the reason, at least, all the guys that knew this stuff are gone, but part of the reason that they evacuate under high temperature is to speed the process up. I mean, they were trying to make these things economically and make money. So they wanted to push as many through as they could in a day. So the guy who's working on this at the Early Television Museum said, well, we could probably hook the damn thing up to the pump for 2 days or a week and pull the vacuum down just as much as if we did it for 7 hours at 700 degrees. So that's another experiment that we're going to do. And that should do an end run around one of the failure modes when working on 15 GP22.
Leave the pump on all the time?
You pump the tube down for a few hours.
I mean, run the set with the pump on.
No.
Oh, well, RCA did. RCA had something they called a demountable vacuum tube. And in fact, it was a big vacuum chamber, and they used to open it up. They put new screens in and different guns and whatever. Then they'd seal it up again, and they run the pump, and they run the TV. You know, consumers aren't going to do that. So everybody knows what a picture tube looks like. This is what RCA decided on their first go-around to make a color picture tube, though. They had a glass front, they had a glass bell, and they had a metal crush seal in the middle. And I'm not going to knock them. I mean, this was some really smart guys, but somehow that seemed like a good idea. It did not work very well, but I guess they probably knew it didn't have to work very long either. And this is what everybody's struggling with now. I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster there. And it's been,
Why did they do that?
We don't know, but again, you have to assume they had a reason for doing it. They were inventing the process.
Yeah.
Well, I'll show you another picture coming up. They did not, in the 15G, they did not coat the screen with phosphor. They didn't know how to do that yet. So they had to make a screen with a shadow mask and then bolt it in here and then close the thing up. So it was they were doing the best they could. I mean, I give them credit. They were really, they were making this stuff up really fast, and it was working.
Problem they were solving by doing it.
It seemed like a good idea at the time. That's the only thing you can figure out. So again, it leaked at that seal. It leaked where they welded the metal together. It leaked at the glass to metal seals, and there were all kinds of problems. So here's what John has attempted to do. You're looking down into the tube now. He's cut the face of it off, and he's ground the cut surface to become smooth. He then cuts it on the other side of the metal seal and grinds it down smooth, and then he seals it with that frit glass in there to basically just weld the face of the tube back onto the bell of the tube without that leak-prone metal seal. Again, I've got to give the guy credit because that's just crazy, but it's working. Of course, once you take that metal ring out, that metal ring is the Ultor, that's your high voltage connection. Now you got no place to hook up the high voltage on the tube anymore. So he's got to drill a hole in the side of this priceless picture tube, and he's got to install a new second anode high voltage button. So again, this, and obviously he's a very smart guy. He's gone in with, you know, gas spectrometers, and he's analyzed the glass, and he's analyzed, and I have no idea what he's doing here, but he's obviously a very smart guy.
The button won't leak?
Well, it's welded in with glass, so it's a glass to metal seal, and it's a glass to glass seal, but it's using modern technology that, and he's a high vacuum specialist at a research university, so he really knows what he's doing, and no, that will not leak. And the reason the low temperature evacuation may help on these is, again, so now you got your decorative mask, you've got your shadow mask and your phosphor screen here, you got all this stuff bolted together, and then it was assembled inside that bell, and the whole thing was bolted together, and the metal gasket was crushed down, and improbably it actually worked. Okay. Coming down to the end here, timeline. 2010, one of the guys, Bob Gallanter, went out to Hawkeye Picture Tube, and he took a camera with him, and he documented the entire process. He recorded that whole process. That's available on the Early Television Museum's YouTube site. That was a good part of our early research efforts. The project was conceived and launched in 2010. It was like, you know, oh crap, you know, it's all gone. Now what are we going to do? So we said, well, you know, wouldn't it be great if we could rebuild our own picture tubes here? Yeah, that'd be really crazy. Okay, let's do it. So, so we launched the project. Had no idea whether it would work or not. Hawkeye donated their equipment when they closed. A fundraising initiative was launched, and in the space of a week, thousands of dollars were raised to purchase a trailer, get the stuff shipped from Iowa over to Columbus, Ohio area, and to build up a war chest for future work that would have to be done to create a CRT facility in the back of the Early Television Museum that you see there.
Okay, quick question. The guy
Sure.
from Hawkeye, the previous owner that when he donated all his equipment, he's very knowledgeable how to rebuild tubes.
Yes, and he is open to the idea of coming out and tutoring people at the new facility in Ohio. He was always in the business of picture tube rebuilding, so part of the war chest is he will want to be paid if he comes out. He's not a hobbyist, so he is open to do that. And one of the Radersdorf brothers, the people from RAC over in France, is also willing to come over and work with us.
But this stuff is not in the trailer at Infoway, is it?
This stuff is was in that trailer at the Early Television Museum. That's the back of the museum in Ohio. And all of the useful equipment has since been brought inside and installed. And I'll show you some.
But it's not in New Jersey here.
No. It was shipped from Iowa to Hilliard, Ohio, to the museum. Okay, so then some initial design work was done. There was some space in the back of the museum. The museum was this big building, and it had a big space out in the back. Well, that space out in the back keeps getting smaller and smaller as more rooms get built in the museum. And now, of course, we've built this giant CO2 lab in the back, and space was left for the various glass lathes and the processing racks, washing stations, so on and so forth. In 2012 was when we sent Nick over to France, and he spent 2 weeks there and basically got the art part of the art and science, thank goodness. The facility design it was modified in 2012 to incorporate the RACS equipment. That's when RACS decided that they were no longer going to stay in business, and some of the equipment that they had there was much nicer than some of the equipment that had been donated from the Hawkeye facility. In 2013, construction began in the back of the museum. And a lot of inventory was actively sourced at that point. We built up a pretty good supply of glass stems, neck tubing, and what guns we could find. The new oven was designed at that point, and we actually did Scotty and RACS one better, and we built an oven big enough to hold a 30-inch tube. The 30-inch tube was the one used in the Dumont Royal Sovereign TV. One of the most collectible TVs. There's a whole bunch of bad 30-inch tubes out there. There was no possible way to get them done before. It looks like this is going to be successful, so we got a 30-inch oven now, so we may be able to do those tubes too. That was designed that way on purpose. 2014, the construction of the CRT facility was completed. The racks closed, the racks equipment was purchased for a scrap value. I have to give a shout out here to my friend Jerome Halfin, who is our active television guy over in France. And Jerome actually paid out of pocket $6,000, which was the scrap value for that equipment, and donated it to the museum. So what a guy. 2015, Nick came up. Nick is in the Navy, and Nick got his, they don't call it vacation in the Navy, do they? He got his leave, and he got a week to come up in the summer of 2015. He gave the equipment a shakedown cruise, and he almost rebuilt the tube. He got to the point of pumping it down in the oven, and something didn't look right. It seemed like the vacuum pumps weren't working right. So he stopped. He had to get back to work, or they were going to throw him the brig. And we sent the vacuum equipment out to our high vacuum researcher guy, and he checked it and he said, yeah, there was a problem here. The gauge wasn't working. The pump was working fine. So the tube probably was successfully evacuated. We just didn't think it was good, but he had to stop, and it wasn't looking good. So anyway, 2016. Everybody comes back. Now we go to the early television convention, which was just this past May, and he took a tube completely through the process and did come up with the first successful rebuild. He did it. We documented it in photos and video. There were all kinds of weird problems along the way, which we learned a lot from. We're still in the learning phase. We're not ready to open up the doors and start accepting picture tubes from people yet. But we are, proof of concept is there. It was done, it works, so it can be done. It's not rocket science, and we got a bunch of not rocket scientists that are doing it.
Did the dimensions match? I would think Hawkeye would be English and Rack would be metric, or no?
Well, there's nothing in the rebuilding equipment that's dimensionally specific at all. It's a lathe. It's ovens, it's handheld equipment.
Yeah, but what about the guns?
Well,
Don't you have European versus American guns?
Another good question, but the Rax was rebuilding a lot of tubes for places in the United States. So we've got stuff that fits. Whether there's also stuff that don't fit, I don't actually know, but that's a good question. And I will put a quick video up here, and you will see 3 days worth of literally blood, sweat, and tears compressed into 4 minutes here. Our high-tech audio system here.
We just had a birth at the museum. We'd like to welcome to the world of 17CD4 with a 12-volt gun.
Clean off the outside of the old tube. Measure it, make sure you know what you're cutting off so you can get the right length on the new gun.
Measure twice, not once.
Score it. Heated wire to fracture it. And you will notice it stays there. And it took about 12 hours for all of the vacuum to leak out. This is where you got to be an artist. So he's putting a new piece of neck glass on to extend the tube to replace the part that he had to cut off.
What is that thing he's waving underneath?
That's a torch. That's a manual source that he's using to modulate the heat more. But again, this is not an automated process. That's the paddle that he's using to shape the glass. That hissing sound is they're blowing air in under pressure so that it goes out a little bit and then he pushes it back again and tries to get it sort of straight. It doesn't have to be exactly straight. Now he's cooling it down.
Regardless of what the outside looks like. Oh, okay. As long as it's not leaking, you're fine. Not this one.
There's the new button with the new evacuating tip. He just put it on now, we didn't see that part. He's taking it, putting it in the evacuation oven. That's where it will be pumped down and then that tip will be sealed off. You got a rough pump and I think it's some sort of a diffusion pump in there. And they pump it down pretty far.
Is this the Navy guy?
Yeah.
Oh, that tipped off.
So now it's evacuated and sealed. Breaks the. Now this is the getter flasher. He's just heating up a scrap piece there. This is low frequency, high energy in that coil. I think the plates are going over it too. Hello.
Buffering.
And this didn't work the first 30 or 40 times we tried it, but they eventually figured out what was wrong. And there's a properly flashed getter. Now he's hooking it up to the spot knocker, which hits it with up to 60,000 volts of electricity. And we realized only after it was all done that there was probably a whole bunch of hard x-rays coming out of that thing.
So 5.5 for 5 minutes, then 7.5.
Activation, higher voltage than normal on the filament to boil it up. Put it on the CRT tester, see if it's any good. Pop a base on it.
We just had a birth at the museum. We'd like to welcome to the world of 17CD4 with a 12-volt gun. We just got good emissions. Our Steve will stand by the birth certificate that we signed.
The end.
Now, was that a metal shell on that tube, or is that a glass?
That was a metal envelope tube, yes.
Those leak down all the time.
What Nick did was scrounge around the back of the museum and find the crappiest, most useless tube that he could find, assuming that things might not go well on the first one.
Because I never had one of those last very long.
Well, we'll let you know.
I'm talking about back in the day.
Yeah.
How hard does the vacuum have to be, like 10 to the minus 6?
You know what? I heard the number, but I'm not a vacuum guy. It's a pretty serious vacuum. Yeah. It's not NASA level vacuums, but there's not much left inside that envelope when they're done. Yeah. And it's surprisingly quick. Yeah. It gets down to might have been 10 to. I don't have a frame of reference to even know what that means. But you would see it on the meter. You would see it drop really surprisingly quickly, and then the last couple of hours it would just go down, a little bit more to the point where it was at the limits of what the pump could do. And the design of the pump was such that when the pump couldn't do any more, the tube was good.
The ions that you talked about, which are a problem in there, is that a result of remnant gas being in there, or things that are left over after evacuating it?
Well, this is where I get shown up as a dumb guy again. I think the ions and the electrons are emitted from the cathode, and the electrons do all the useful work, and the ions are basically just causing trouble there. So you've got to get rid of them. I don't think it's
when you make the electrons, you're making ions too.
And they're heavier than the
I will actually have to go research that, so I don't sound so dumb this time. Yeah. Okay.
So, what Dave didn't really get excited about, at least here, was that they did make their first rebuild of a tube there in Ohio. So it really is an amazing feat. And it could bring a lot more to the collecting society when it comes to TV, vintage television. So stay tuned, as they say. And speaking about staying tuned, July meeting will be here, all right? And we will, looks like we're going to have a guest speaker, Alan Walke, who had given us a talk before on scopes. He works with Tektronix. We've been in contact with him, and he'll put a presentation together for us. So that should work out well.
Could he fix my scope?
Yes, leave that scope. All right, we have an auction of parts, lots and lots of parts, okay? So please step outside and let's have the auction of parts. Thank you.
Oh, help yourself to,
Scope, yes, put them out on the,
That's a nice scope, isn't it?
No, take- My copy.
Yeah, I hit paper.
Yes. I'll send it to you. The back of the card's on the back of the card. Sorry?
He's always curious.